So, this is our first lecture in which we learn stuff. I'm not lecturing about the course syllabus or late policies. We're learning new material. And the purpose of this chapter is introductory. Setting the foundation for this new language we're going to be learning on this new and fascinating topic. So what I want to do in this section, today and tomorrow, is introduce the disciplines of anatomy and physiology. What do they each mean and how are they complementary? We will discuss the organization of the human body. So there are different levels of hierarchy. Very small molecules to tissues to larger organ systems. And we can look at either level or any level and study anatomy or physiology. We'll discuss the organization as a whole. We'll talk about what it means for an organism to be characterized as alive. The anatomy and physiology disciplines that we're discussing are really those that are focused on keeping an organism alive. They support normal function and or describe normal function. So what is that normal function? What does it take for an organism to be alive? And the concept of homeostasis is central to that idea. Homeostasis, think of it as balance. There's some ideal situation. And homeostasis is that ideal situation. And we want to stay within that ideal situation so that we can live our most comfortable life. But we don't always stay in balance. Some things are stressful and push us outside of a homeostatic balance. We'll get to that eventually. We'll talk about the different types of tissues, the different regions in the body, spaces within the body, how they're named and why they're named the way they are. And we'll learn the language that allows us to describe not only those regions, but to navigate through the body, to describe the position of something in relation to something else. Learning anatomy and physiology really does require that you learn a new language. There are words here that we'll use regularly that you've never seen before. So, I suppose it's important to figure out, what are we even studying? Anatomy and physiology, before you even learn about those disciplines. What are we looking to learn in this course? And the answer is simply how this biological machine works. You've all got one. It's slightly different, yet it allows you to interact with your environment. It allows you to sense and respond to stimuli. It allows you to interact with other people, make friends, generate relationships. And for that to happen, you need to be able to sustain normal function. You need energy from somewhere. You need oxygen and water and various other elements from the foods that you need. And it's really remarkable if you stop and think about it, all of the things that are working together at once at any given moment to allow you to sit here and be bored. Your heart's pumping, you're breathing, your muscles are twitching if you're restless, your eyes are moving around, your hand muscles are moving to write notes down. What notes are you writing? They're things that you've heard or things that you're seeing with your eyes. You're processing that information into a different form. It's really a remarkable system, or a system of systems. And we're doing our best to decipher those systems in this course. There's a lot of material in this course, as you might have heard before. There's not enough time to get through all of the systems and all of the interactions. We're hitting the highlights and trying to figure out how this machine works. So what are the disciplines that describe this machine? Anatomy and physiology are the two main pillars that describe this machine. And you'll have a figure like this in your book, or at least these descriptions in your book. By the way, I posted a PDF copy of the open source textbook to Moodle. You can freely download it there. or use the link that's in the syllabus to get it from their webpage, so it's freely available. I also don't know if you caught it, but the first title slide before we did the questions showed you the reading sections for this chapter. So 1.1 to 1.6 in the open source, OpenStax textbook are what we're referring to in this section. And I'm working on a document right now that's going to line up the content in each lecture with the appropriate sections in the book. And when I have that in a form that is readable, I'm going to post that as well so you guys can follow along. But you'll have something like this in the book, and what we're looking at here is just a simple division between anatomy on the left-hand side and physiology on the right, and each row is a different branch or a different flavor of anatomy and or physiology. And in gross general terms, the left-hand column deals with structure. Just how things are put together. Where are they? What are their shapes? How do you describe the physical arrangement of things within the body? And so you'll see in lab, if you go today or tomorrow, you'll learn how to use the microscopes. And you'll have slides to look at really small cells or sections of tissue. And that's the study of the arrangement of cells. That's a discipline known as histology. And histology simply means to cut or section or put together from slices. And it makes sense that you're looking at these individual small microscopic slices and trying to understand how those cells work together in a tissue. So histology is one branch of anatomy. You can also look at surface anatomy, just landmarks on your body, regional anatomy, if you want to look at how things are arranged within the torso or in the leg. These are all different ways to describe how we're approaching the structure of these tissues, these systems that make up the body. On the other side, physiology is not the structure, but how it works. And there is a difference, although they are very closely related. And something that I'm fond of reminding you is that structure impacts function, or structure dictates function. You see it all over. Structure dictates function. The way a tissue is put together dictates how it works. A muscle shortens because it has contractile proteins. The proteins are structural. The function is movement. Those two things go hand in hand. Bones don't shorten. They might move a little bit or flex, but they certainly don't shorten. They don't contract because they're made up of different cells. It's a different tissue. So structure and function are tightly related. But the study of function is the study of physiology. How does the body as a whole work? And the answer to that question is complicated. So we break it down. How do nerves work? How does muscle work? How does the heart as an organ work? How does the digestive system work? The person that's interested in any of those questions is a physiologist pertaining to that specific area. I would consider myself an exercise physiologist. I've trained to use exercise as a stress, to apply exercise to a situation and then see how the body responds. You can't open up a body and say, that's exercise. You can't point to it. It's not an organ. It's not a structure, but it's a phenomenon that we apply and that we found to be really useful in promoting health and fitness and treating disease. So exercise physiology is a branch of physiology. The body works in a certain way normally, and it works in a different way during exercise. So we should discuss all of these levels to get a comprehensive understanding of how the body works, the anatomy and physiology of the body. We should look at all of these in depth. Maybe we would set aside 1 week for each of these areas. That's incredibly short. There's no possible way that we're going to be able to get through all of these in the course. But just be aware that these are options. These are flavors of anatomy and physiology, and we will hit the major organs and organ systems. We'll hit digestion, we'll hit muscle, we'll hit the skeletal system, and we'll talk about those in turn throughout the course. So the body is a pretty general and amorphous term. We don't really know, well, it's this package. I'm standing in front of you, you can see my body, you have your body sitting in a chair, but what do I mean about the body? How is the body organized? It's too broad to say that we want to study the body. Depending on our focus, we can build from a more detailed, small-scale picture up to the entire body proper. Now, we're not going to do this, but you could that will help. You could, if you wanted to, start with the building blocks of cells and tissues, the atoms, the elements, and figure out how they make molecules. There is that level of invisible anatomy and physiology within the body. The chemical components of life that make up basic structures like DNA. That's not the focus of this class. You'll see a lot of that in biochemistry, in genetics when you get there. The focus of this class is not that basic. We do go so far down as to investigate individual cells or types of cells. And at this level, we don't spend a lot of time there. We look at the basic components of a cell. I want you to be able to tell a muscle cell from a skin cell, or a muscle cell from a nerve cell. And they have basic differences that allow them to function differently. Knowing those basic differences will help underpin your understanding of the tissue as a whole. Now, all of those individual cells, when you group like cells together, create a tissue. A type of tissue where all cells are pointed towards one common goal or one common function. A bunch of muscle cells together form a muscle tissue, and a muscle tissue has the job or has the capacity to shorten and move, provide locomotion. A bunch of nerve cells together form a nerve or a network of nerves, form the brain and allow you to process information and make memories and recall those memories. So the tissue level is where function really starts to emerge. Tissue in and of itself, though, doesn't give us, it gives us some function, but it doesn't allow us to do work, let's put it that way, to accomplish a goal. To accomplish a goal. Tissues together create organs and or organ systems, where a goal is paramount. Here you can see the stomach wrapped with layers of muscular tissue. There are other types of tissue. There's nervous tissue involved. There's some connective tissue. And these different tissues grouped together in one organ allow it to achieve some purpose. The stomach wants to churn and mix food and help break down foodstuffs so that you can sit here and consider how boring the lecture is so far. So you can stay alive for a while. Even that in and of itself doesn't hold all the responsibility for delivering food to the entire body or harnessing energy from that food. The stomach is only one part of this major digestive system. The intestines, the pancreas, the liver, all other parts that allow us to completely harness whatever energy we can and excrete or get rid of the rest. Now, systems together make up the body. The digestive system with the nervous system, plus the skeletal system, the endocrine system, the muscular system, all of the systems together make up the body as a whole. So it's much more complicated than just saying we're studying the structure and function of the body. Well, what part of the body? What system? What level? Is it a tissue? Is it everything together? Now this seems quite complicated, but we are breaking down our study into 11 systems. Over the course of 2 semesters, we will study in depth and or briefly these 11 systems. This semester, our goal is to get through 5. And I'm really on the fence about removing one of those and studying only 4 major systems. So 11 systems of the body are listed here. The integumentary system, your skin as an organ, this barrier of defense between internal and external environments. That is an important system. We might look at that. That's the one system that I'm considering not focusing on in depth. But we will certainly discuss the skeletal, muscular, and nervous systems in this half of the course. Those are 3 of the major systems, in my opinion. As luck would have it, in a course like this, my opinion becomes your opinion, for better or for worse. Skeletal, muscular, and nervous are very important systems for normal function, normal motion, locomotion, and working of the body, especially in an exercise sense, which, being human kineticists, is probably one of your major focuses or interests. So we're focusing on those certainly. And the endocrine system, the system that describes movement and synthesis of hormones in the body and actions of hormones within the body, we'll touch on at the end. Hopefully we have time. Everything else is saved for second semester. Lymphatics, cardiovascular is huge, respiratory is huge, digestive, urinary, reproductive, all of those are equally huge as well. There's a lot of information to get through when you lay it out like this. So the major systems that we want to look at, you have these little primers in your book that outline the basic function, the basic structures, and the key players in each system. It's a high-level executive summary, if you will, of what each system entails and where you should focus. And it is difficult to only focus on one system because they often work together. You can use these almost as a reminder to say, my focus here is the integumentary system. I'm not worried about nervous innervation right now. I only want to focus on skin and skin cells, the dermis, the epidermis, hairs, sweat glands, sebaceous oil glands. I only want to focus on those things. And it's a high-level overview like this that will help anchor your focus when you're studying. So the skin and all its attached surfaces, features, the skeletal system, of course, the bones, the cartilage, tendons and ligaments. Just ligaments. Tendons are part of the muscular system, so there's muscle, there's contractive tissue, there's fascia or connective tissue that helps keep muscles together and define some surfaces. Tendons will allow muscles to anchor to bones. So we're understanding the muscular system requires a deep knowledge of the skeletal system. Those things are always linked and work together. If you take a muscle out, put it in your hand, and flop it on the desk, it'll shorten, it'll ball up. It won't do anything though. You need the attachment to the skeletal system to have flexion or motion. I can only do this because of the combined efforts of those systems with others, with the nervous system. I'm sending a signal to the tissues to contract and move properly. So number of systems, number of tissues, many different areas to focus on, and we will do these each in turn. In order to study these areas properly, to be able to communicate with other anatomists, or for me to be able to communicate with you and you understand what I'm saying, we need to be all on the same page with this new descriptive language required by certainly anatomy, but also physiology. basic anatomical terminology. And what we're going to look at and reinforce in this section are what's the normal state? What's the basic body position to which we're referring? If I'm using references to other structures, or if I have names for a certain location in the body, is it the same if I'm standing in front of you as if I'm lunging side to side, or I'm partway through a stride? Parts of the body are not oriented in the same way while moving, so we need to have a standard body position. The regions of the body are all named differently, and those come into play when we think of the muscles or bones or passageways. They often take on names of the regions where you find them. Or specific names for muscle will describe the 2 points or the 2 regions that it connects. So knowing the regions of the body is very important. Directional terms are equally important as well. Which way is up? Well, right now, if I stand here, it's towards the head. If I was upside down, which way would up be? For you, it would be towards my feet as I'm standing on my head. For me, it would still be towards my head. Up doesn't work. Down doesn't work. We use different directional terms that ignore the body's position in space. Then we look at planes and sections. We have windows into the body. And then while things are named, muscles are named, bones are named, structures and surfaces are named, the spaces created by those structures are also named. The cavities within the body usually hold important organs. They have their own names as well. So all of these things we need to be on the same page with in order to communicate properly in terms of anatomy and physiology. So the root of this new language is the anatomical position. The anatomical position. This is a way that anatomists have standardized the position of a body in space. If you're discussing where something is in relation to a given structure, if you have one body position, you always know where to look. The anatomical position ensures that there is one standardized body position. What is that standardization? The person stands erect, and really we should asterisk this statement because often when you are observing a body, you are not observing a living body. You'll often observe a cadaver or a piece of a body. And so a cadaver can't stand erect, but it does take on the same orientation of all of the structures. It stands erect, or if it's lying on its back, it's called supine. A person stands erect. That is, there's no folding of the limbs. The limbs are together. The upper limbs are by the sides, the lower limbs are together, the head is neutral and faces the observer. So generally, a cadaver is lying on its back, or a living specimen is standing facing you in a neutral position, all limbs together. The upper extremities are at the sides, the feet, the lower extremities are together, and the palms are turned forward. That's really the only complication that might arise with this system. You place the palms down, you place the palms forward. It doesn't seem to matter yet, but when you talk about the muscles in the forearm and the hand and how nerves and blood vessels run through, you want to make sure that there's a standardized position. Palms forward is that position. Feet flat on the floor, or in the case of a cadaver, pointing up. This is the anatomical position. Neutral gaze, neutral head position. It's not tilted. It's not turned one way or the other. Open palms facing forward. Upper arms at the sides. Lower limbs together. Feet, quote unquote, flat on the floor. So I'm going to ask you a question using turning point then. about the anatomical position, so make sure that you're still connected to the session. And I'll ask you basically, a body in the anatomical position, does it face the observer? True or false? If you're paying attention on the last slide, this should be very easy. Should it face the observer? Yes? It still says polling's closed. Does everyone have that error? Okay. Has anyone been able to answer even the other questions? I have polling open. Let's try one thing. Hold on a second. All right. Okay, polling is closed currently. Let me re-poll the question. Polling is open. Can you see the question and or answer or respond? No. That's unfortunate.
Is there like a session ID?
Session ID is HKIN 151, all one word, lowercase. So if you have the option to input a session ID, do that. HKIN 151, all lowercase. All right, let me try one other thing. So I show 35 of you are in, which is great. Now if I open this up, all right. Let's pretend that you answered, and we'll come back to class tomorrow and try to figure this out. Of course, I think what's happening here is it's giving me simulated answers. I'm having a hard time opening it up to the class. We don't have much time left in class, so just leave it for now. But if these were real answers, a body in the anatomical position faces the observer. Yes, true, it does, absolutely. A body in the anatomical position faces the observer. And so you're not going to be able to answer this question either. But had you been able to, a body in the anatomical position rests with the palms facing down. True or false? Resounding false. Absolutely. B is the correct answer. These simulated people got it all wrong. Fantastic. So anatomical position is the standardized arrangement of limbs and structures in the body that allow you to refer to different regions or different structures, that allow you to describe that structure and understand function. You could say, I want to look at the arm, or I want to look at the head, I want to look at the foot. And in general, those regional names, although they're fairly high level, do hold up. But it's hard to say, I want to look at the arm and know where along the arm you're referring to. There's many different parts of the arm, or there's different parts of the leg. There's different parts of the trunk or the torso. And so to communicate with more specificity, we need to know the names of these individual regions within the body. And the sad truth is, well, there's a couple things. One, the sad truth is that memorizing this, it won't hurt. It's probably one of the only ways that you'll become familiar with these different regional names. Two, as we progress through naming muscles, naming nerves, because they take on parts of the names of the structures through which they pass, it will become obvious what regions I'm referring to. So when I say the head or the skull, for instance, the more correct way to describe that is the cephalic region. The head is the cephalic region. And this is what describes that region. It's a prefix for some nerves, or it describes the area that a nerve might arise from the cephalic region. That means the head. But even that is a little general. The head could refer to the brain, or the skull, or the face. You can think of individual bone names within the face. Broadly, the head is broken up into cranial and facial areas. And then within that, there's more and more subdivision. If I just told you that at one point in this class, we're going to look at the head nerve, there's no way to know what that might do, or where it might go, or be found. If I said we're looking at the cephalic nerve, okay, still pretty broad and general, doesn't really give me much information. If I said a cranial nerve, all of a sudden, okay, well, I know it's somewhere up here in the cranium. Or a facial nerve, I know it has something to do with the face, or this area of the head. And you can see that as we break down the regions into smaller and smaller boxes, we get more and more precise. You can see that with the trunk. So the torso, big area, lots of stuff in here. And in broad terms, if you want to point to a different area of the trunk or a different area of the torso, you could say, look in the pelvic region, down low, or the abdominal region, or the thoracic region. And you're gradually honing in your description, pointing your person in the right direction. And you could go through many examples. The upper limb is broken down into brachial and antebrachial sections for the upper and lower arms specifically. The lower limb is broken up as well. Even the points of contact between those two sections have different names. So the knee, behind the knee, the front of the knee, is the popliteal region. That's very specific to the knee. It's in the lower limb. It's not either part of the lower leg. It's between those two. And so I'm not going to go through them in depth, but have a look over this. Try to remember what the regional names are. Try to quiz yourself, quiz your friends. Knowing these regional names is good. It will certainly help you if you're lost in our discussion of muscles. You don't know what this muscle is, and you can reason out, oh, sternocleidomastoid. Sternum, bottom of the cephalic portion of the back of the skull, and the mastoid process on the mandible. That describes all of the points of attachment of that muscle. And don't remember that. That's just an example. You've never heard of that before, and you won't for a long time. We have a couple minutes left, and I want to introduce these terms. We'll come back, and I'll do a quiz on them at the start of class tomorrow. So there are names of different regions in the body. Cranial, facial, abdominal, pelvic. If you don't quite know the name of a region, you could say it's near the facial region, or it's near the thorax, it's near the pelvis. But near doesn't tell me where to look. So I need a vocabulary to tell me where to look. And these directional terms are that vocabulary. These are often given in pairs. One means one direction, the other means the opposite. And we'll practice with these a fair bit. Again, it's one of those things that if you review them over and over, it'll become second nature. But to start, you might just have to stare at this diagram for a while. So pairs. One pair that I'm highlighting here, proximal and distal, describes closer to or further away from the core. If something is distal, it's further from the core. My fingers are distal to my elbow. It's further from the core. My shoulder is proximal to my elbow. it's closer to the core. Proximal and distal are a pair that describe towards or away from the core. Medial and lateral, we run into a fair bit. If you imagine the body in its anatomical position, you have two arms, you have two legs, two eyes, two ears. It's mirrored. The body is mirrored on one side versus the other. And that point, that imaginary line down the middle, where one side of the body is reflected in the other, is the midline. Medial and lateral describe a structure in relation to the midline. The imaginary line right down the middle of the body. So I could say, my hand is lateral to my hip. In the anatomical position, that's true. My hand is lateral, it's further away from the midline when compared to my hip. One last example, and these aren't all of the pairs, but they're some of the important ones. Superior versus inferior. I asked you where was up. Notice up and down aren't on here at all. We use superior and inferior to describe direction. Superior is always towards the head. Inferior is always towards the feet. So in the anatomical position, my elbow is superior to my hand. It's both superior and proximal. Both of those apply. So we'll come back in class tomorrow. We'll do a couple of brief quizzes on these pairings. We'll talk about some of the other ones that we haven't mentioned yet today. And try to at least sign up for a Turning Point account if you don't get a subscription. Use your St. FX email.